Hi, this is John Lee, and thanks for tuning in to Synfig video tutorial number 4, Creating Shapes. You can follow today's tutorial on the Synfig website if you like by heading over to www.synfig.org, clicking on Documentation, then clicking on Manual, and finally, under the Diving In chapter, click on Creating Shapes. And here is today's tutorial in text format. Now, up till now, we've been creating basic primitive shapes like circles and rectangles, but if you want to create more complicated shapes, or any shape that you can imagine, we use the spline tool. So just click on that, and I want to draw your attention over the spline tool window on the right side of the screen. Make sure you have Create Outline checked off and Create Region checked off and everything else unchecked. And now you're ready to plot your points on the canvas. And you just left click your mouse to start plotting your points. Now notice where I plotted the points, the corners are actually hard corners. If you actually want smooth curves instead of hard corners, you left click and drag. And that creates the bezier handles. So you can just left click and drag, set the bezier handle angle any way you like, left click and drag. And then once you get to the end, you can head over to the first point, right click and choose Loop Spline, and that will close your spline. In Illustrator, they call this a path, but in Synfig, we call it a spline. It's basically an outline. It's the same principle, just a different name. And once we've closed our shape, now we can hit the Execute button to create our shape. What that does is it applies the outline and the fill color, which I have the outline color set to black and the fill color set to white. If you don't have it set to those colors, all you have to do is hit the Reset Colors to Black and White button over here, and it'll set it to the default colors. Now, let's say you've created the shape, but you want to manipulate the shape. It isn't exactly the way you wanted it. So click on the Transform tool, click on the shape on your canvas, and notice that the vector points start appearing along with the bezier handles. So what I want to do is I want the points with the hard corners to be smooth curves. So I'm going to make sure that you have this toggle tangent handles turned on. It should be on by default, but if it isn't, just click on it and choose any of those hard corner points and drag out. And automatically the bezier handles will start to extend. You can manipulate the curve any way you like. So now I've created a nice, smooth, curvy shape. Let's say I want to eliminate some points because I've created too many. So all you have to do is just right-click on one of these vector points, choose Remove Item Smart, and it removes the point. So right-click on any point, Remove Item Smart, or, sorry, I chose the wrong one. Okay, let me just remove that. Remove Item Smart. Remove Item Smart. Okay, so now we've decreased the number of points on this shape. It's more efficient and it's easier to manipulate. But let's say we don't have enough points. We actually want to add more detail to this shape. All you have to do is right click on any line segment and choose, you guessed it, Insert Item Smart instead of Remove Item. And there you go. It inserts the item. Just click on another part, Insert Item. Pretty self-explanatory. Now let's say we want to increase the line width. We want to have variable line width. So the next step is head over to your panel window, your layer panel window, and make sure outline is selected. If you have region selected, the width handles won't work because shapes do not have width, only outlines do. So make sure the outline layer is selected, and you can turn on your width handles, which are turned off. The button is turned off by default. So just make sure it's turned on, and you'll see these purple handles start to appear, which you can drag in any direction, and it'll increase or decrease the line width. So you can play with those to your satisfaction. It's pretty self-explanatory. And if you want to manipulate the vector points, all you have to do is click on the vector point and just move it around any way you like. So these orange buttons. Pretty easy. So when you're creating your first shape, and it's not exactly the way you want it, don't worry about it. You can always manipulate those points afterwards to have it look any way you want. Now, there are actually two ways to create objects and shapes within Synfig. One way is the way we've just covered, which is to plot out points using the spline tool. The other way is to use a tablet. And yes, Synfig recognizes the use of a tablet along with pressure sensitivity, but I don't really recommend using a tablet unless you're only interested in creating static artwork, because when you're plotting out points one by one, you have total control of the number of points and where they are, and the curvature with the bezier handles, or whether they're a sharp corner or a smooth curve. But when you're drawing with a tablet, it creates a bajillion vector points. So that becomes very difficult to animate when you have all these points to keep track of. And it also eats up processing power. So it's actually better to use as few points as possible to be really economical with the number of points and parameters that you're using. And that's why drawing with a tablet isn't very efficient or particularly useful when it comes to animation. If you want to animate your object, create your shape one point at a time using the spline tool. But if you want to create static artwork, I would actually recommend using something like Adobe Photoshop or a third-party drawing program. You can find a bunch of them. There's free ones online that you can use, and importing that, for background artwork or props or whatever. But if you still want to use Synfig to draw static artwork, you can use your tablet, and I'm going to show you how to do that right now. So let me just delete the artwork here. And first, make sure you've plugged in your tablet and then open Synfig. If you already have Synfig open and you've plugged in your tablet, Synfig is not going to recognize a tablet. So if you have Synfig open, close it down, insert your tablet, make sure your system recognizes it, and then reopen Synfig. Now, I already have my tablet connected, so I'm not going to do that, but just make sure that you've turned on Synfig after your tablet has been plugged in. And the next step is you head over to the Toolbox menu and choose File. And under File, select Input Devices. And under Device, it should recognize your tablet. If it doesn't say anything there, then something's wrong, but you should see your tablet within the menu here. And mine is Wacom Tablet Pressure Stylus, so I've selected that. And under Mode, make sure you've chosen Screen. I think it's set to Disabled by default, so make sure Screen is selected. And beneath that, under the Axes tab, you'll see all these different settings for the various parameters. Pressure is by default set to 3. We don't really have to change anything here, so click on Save, and then choose Close. Now, up till now, we've been manipulating everything with our mouse. But now I'm going to say switch over to your pen or your stylus to move your cursor around, and then choose the spline, and then choose the draw tool, which is this little ink bottle on the toolbox. And select that. And then over here on the right side, under the draw tool panel, you'll see all these different options. Now these are context sensitive options that are specifically for our pen. If I had clicked on the draw tool with my mouse, it would have created a draw tool profile for the mouse only. So Synfig knows to create separate profiles for the mouse and for the pen. So that's why I say make sure you have your pen in use when you're selecting the draw tool. And in the draw tool panel window, choose Create Outline. Make sure Auto Loop is checked off. Make sure Auto Extend, Pressure Width, and Minimum Pressure are also checked off, and everything else is unchecked. And under Minimum Pressure, make sure that's 0. Under Spline Smoothness, go ahead and set that to 0.01. And once you've done that, you're now ready to draw your outline. But one more last step I forgot to mention. Your point size, I think by default is set to 6.5. This is your line thickness. Set that up to a maximum of 20 points, so that we can actually see the line width variation. Anything less is kind of maybe too small, or at least for the purposes of this tutorial. You can set it to however you like, but I recommend 20 for now. And with my pen, I am now going to draw on the tablet. And initially, all it does is create this super thin line. But once you move the pen off the tablet, it now creates our line. I didn't create enough of variable width, so let me try that again. I'm going to create more pressure width, pressure sensitivity here. Alright, there we go. Now you can see the line width a little more clearly. And now what I'm going to do is draw a second line near where the first line ends. Alright, there we go. Now, I want to draw your attention over to the layer panel window. Notice that there is only one layer. And in a previous tutorial, I mentioned that Synfig creates a separate layer for literally every single object. Well, in this case, we created two separate lines. How come there aren't two separate layers in the layer panel window? The reason is because we have Auto Extend checked off in the Draw Tools panel. And what that does is it tells Synfig to combine two lines when you start the beginning of a new line near the end of an old line. So Synfig will automatically join those 2 points and treat it as one object. So this outline is really now one object, even though we drew two outlines to create it. Now the other thing we want to do is create a fill for this outline that we've just drawn out. And if we click on the Fill tool bucket and click on the canvas, notice that it doesn't create a fill. I'm not sure why. It's probably because they still have features to work out with Synfig, and that's probably why it doesn't work, but there is a way to create a fill on an outline that doesn't have a fill. And you do that by selecting on the outline in the layer panel window, right-clicking, choosing New Layer, and then under Geometry, choose Region. And it just creates this random fill shape without an outline. And what we're going to do is join this fill shape to the outline layer. And to do that, we make sure that the shape is selected, which is called Region under the layer panel, and Shift and left-click on the outline layer so that both the region and the outline are both selected at the same time. And then you head over to the left lower corner here under the parameters window, and under vertices, right-click and choose Link. And what that will do is it'll map the shape to the outline, like so. There you have it. Okay, so now let me just I'm going to toggle off the bezier handles. I'm also going to toggle off the width handles. So I'm going to move these endpoints to the bottom. Actually, I'm just going to join this. I'm going to close this outline. Dragging that point over there, right-clicking and choosing Loop. So it should have looped that. Okay. So now it's a closed shape. And actually, I want to change these hard corners into nice smooth corners. So make sure you click on the tangent handles button, and then you can smooth out those hard corners. There we go. Ugh, I don't like that. And so here we have our shape, and like I mentioned earlier, there's a bajillion points now. If you wanted to animate this and you wanted the shape to change over time, this would be a real pain in the butt. But Synfig actually has a tool where you can manipulate a bunch of points at the same time. It's a smooth tool over here in the toolbox on the upper right corner. And what you do is, once you have the smooth tool selected, you have to drag a selection box by left-clicking your mouse and dragging a box around a series of points. And you'll see all of these points highlighted. And the smooth move tool sort of smudges the position of the points in the general direction of your mouse. So select a bunch of points, click on, let me just turn off these bezier handles. Click on any vector point and drag it around and see how it works. Just moves a bunch of points, kind of smudges them in a general direction. So that's one way you can manipulate a bunch of points at the same time. There you go. You can also manipulate points one at a time with the smooth move tool, but it's not really useful that way. Right, so let's say we want to apply a texture to this fill color, the white fill color, and leave the outline intact. Well, you do that by importing a PNG or a bitmap image. I'm going to have the region layer selected, which is our fill shape, and right-click. Oh, no, I'm sorry. With the region layer selected, I'm going to actually go to the caret menu button on the upper left corner of the canvas. Click on that, choose File, and choose Import. And I'm going to import some artwork, a bitmap image, a PNG image in this case. This was some artwork I did a couple of months ago. And notice that the artwork is now in the system, but it hasn't applied, it filled the entire canvas. It didn't fill in the region, which is what we want. First, what I want to do is actually resize this image because it's a little too large. So I'm going to select the PNG layer, right-click on that, choose New Layer, choose Transform, and choose Scale. Now, the Scale button, the Scale effect is actually going to affect all these layers beneath it. I only want to have the Scale layer applied to the PNG image only. So to do that, I'm going to select the Scale layer and the PNG image, and then right-click and choose Group Layer. So now the Scale layer only affects the PNG image because they're both encapsulated within the group. So with the Scale layer selected, I am now going to change the amount. The default value is set to 0. The smaller you make this value, the smaller your image will be. The larger you make the value, the larger your image will be. I want to make my image smaller, so right now it's at 0, so I'm going to choose -0.5, which is actually less than 0. And there, that's the size. That's a good size for my image. By the way, this is artwork I created for a webcomic online somewhere. It's called FU Point Modic. It's not safe for work, so not for children. If you want to check it out, feel free to type that in Google search if you want. Let's see. Okay, so I have the Scale layer set. Now I want to have this group layer affect the region. So what I'm going to do is create another group layer that includes this group layer with the Scale and PNG image and the region. So we do that by selecting all. Select the group layer, select the region, and choose group layer. And there we go. So now that groups this new group layer with the region layer. And now I can go to this subgroup folder, which is going to affect all the layers beneath it within this group layer. And with the subgroup folder selected, I am now going to go to the blend method option under the parameters window, and it's by default set to composite. If you want to change the default blend method, all you have to do is go to this option in your toolbox and choose straight onto to have it set as our default. But here I'm going to manually select straight onto. And there you go. It's applied our graphic PNG image onto the layer. But let's say I want to move this texture layer around because I don't like where it's positioned. What you do is you head over to the group layer where the scale effect and the PNG image is, and we're going to select the PNG image, right click, new layer, transform, and then translate, which allows us to move our image along the X or Y axis. And now you'll see this little green button appearing in the center of the canvas, and if you move that around, you can see our PNG image moving around in the shape of the fill. And Okay, so let's say you're moving your texture around. It's not large enough to cover the shape of the fill. So that's where this scale effect comes in handy. You just change this back to a higher number, like 0. And there you go, it fills in the shape. So this is pretty much the basics of creating a shape and adding a texture. In our next lesson, we will be creating our own custom shape and having a flower bloom in real time. Thanks for tuning into this video. I'll see you in the next video. Please click like and or subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Take care.